Good morning, everybody. The title of our paper is Freudian Reading of Beck's Endgame and Pinter's The Caretaker, a Comparative Study, written by two instructors, Zena Dhia and Khaleel from the University of Karbala, College of Education for Humanities, Department of English. First of all, let's talk about psychoanalysis and overview. Psychoanalysis is defined as a method of treating mental disorders, and it attributes our thoughts and action to unconscious motives and conflicts. And the aim of psychoanalysis therapy is to release suppressed emotions and experiences. Freud articulated and refined the concepts of the unconscious, infantile sexuality, and depression, and he proposed a tripartite account of the mind's structure. Freud also believed that much of human behavior was motivated by two driving instincts, the life instinct and death instinct. Psychoanalytic theory, literary theory, a broad term for the various types of literary theory that focuses on the inner workings of the human psyche. Freudian approach based on the theories of the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. A Freudian psychoanalytic Freudian approach is concerned with psychic attachments, conflicts, and motivations. The influence of the character's ego, superego, and ID, as well as pointing out the sexual applications in the symbols and imagery. Freud's theory of consciousness. Consciousness is divided into three distinct levels: the conscious, the subconscious, or preconscious, and the unconscious. The preconscious and unconscious, the subconscious or preconscious, is the storehouse of all remembered experience. And the final level of consciousness is known as the unconscious, where we find our thoughts that are buried deep within ourselves. Freud's tripartite theory of personality. Freud distinguished three structural elements within the mind: ID, ego, and superego. The ID is that part of the mind in which are situated the instinctual sexual drives. The superego contains the conscious, namely socially acquired control mechanisms. The ego is the conscious self that is created by the dynamic tensions and interactions between the ID and the superego, and has the task of reconciling their conflicting demands with the requirements of external reality. Samuel Beckett, 1906-1989, Beckett was a proponent of the theater of the absurd, influenced by the existential philosophy, believing that life was absurd and meaningless. The Endgame. Endgame is about four characters, a play, about four characters who are the sole survivors in a bomb shelter in the aftermath of Cold War. Ham, a blind and paralyzed man confined to a wheelchair, and his servant, Clove, who suffers from his leg and is physically incapable of sitting down, and Ham's crippled parents, Nag and Nell, who are confined to dustbins. They await an unspecified end. Endgame, again, it contains loss, disease, mental decay, which are prevalent in the play. However, despite the degenerate world and inevitability of the end which permeated through Endgame, the characters desire to continue. The degenerated state of the world and the mental and physical infirmities place a high priority to analyze this play on the basis of Freud's psychoanalytic theory. The role of unconscious. According to Freud's theory of unconscious, it can be said that people live with the illusion of conscious and awareness. The claim can be applied to the play in the soliloquy by Ham. He says, "The bigger a man is, the fuller he is." This statement signifies the significance of conscious in life. According to typographical model of Freud, in the conscious part of psyche, the repetitive patterns are available, and this repetition of experience can be the reason for Ham's failing to find meaning, as he always inquires the time for his painkiller. In another part of the play, Ham emphasizes the unconscious over conscious by talking about the madman whom he once met. I know, this is a quotation, I once knew a madman who thought the end of the world had come. He was a painter and a grave digger. Here, the madman is not actually mad. He trespasses his own conscious and boundaries through unconscious. Repression, according to Freud, repression is a defensive mechanism in which painful memories cannot be accessed. Repression occurs when a thought, memory, feeling is too painful for the individual. The repression in the play can be understood when Nag and Nayel talk about the accident that they had. This accident had led to their being crippled. A sense of melancholy, according to Freud, melancholia is a response to loss of valuable entity to human. It is a logical way to deal with the trauma of the subjects. One of the main themes in the play is concerned with the sense of past, its relation with the present, and its effect on the current situation of characters. The sense of loss and feeling of nostalgia are also prominent in the play. Sense of melancholia, the way Nayel talks about yesterday shows how nostalgic she is about it. Nayel and Nayel are deeply nostalgic for this yesterday. And also in another part, Ham and Glove talk about nature, and they are also, the characters cannot overcome the loss of nature, hence they are melancholic at the end for the past. Interpretation of dreams, Freud says that dreams contain hidden desires, and their interpretation can unveil the unconscious during sleep. The unconscious is free to express itself. Ham and Glove talk about their dreams when they are awake. They don't directly talk about what they want, their desires and anxieties. In one part, Glove reveals indirectly what he wants. I love order, it's my dream. This shows he loves order and he likes to dream about it. Childhood, memory, and fear of loneliness. People are a product of their childhood. The unconscious of a person is formed by his role in the family complex. One of the aspects of the play is a fear of loneliness, which is also explicit in some of the characters. Freud's theory of life drive and death drive. Freud believes that all instincts fall into two major opposition forces, life drive and death drive. Life drive, the life instinct, deal with basic survival. Death drive is a drive toward death, in which Freud proposed the goal of all life is death. Freud believed that people typically direct their death instinct outwards, like correction, and sometimes inside, like self-harm and suicide. Freud's theory of drive death, drawing examples from Endgame, melancholia, repetition, compulsion, ambivalence are among destructive elements of death drive which push Ham to his death. This shows that Ham's longing for death outweighs the desire to prolong his experience. Ham's vain hope to go out to the sea and lie down on the shore is a symbol of his desire to die. The way he makes pillow of sand for his head and let the tides submerge him is like resting in a coffin. Little by little, Ham grows bored with his stories until Glove Ham, and it's the end. We have come to the end. I don't need you anymore. Harold Pinter is one of the most influential and best regarded English playwrights in the modern world, and he's one of the one of the playwrights who is concerned with the theater of the absurd and existentialist, in his plays we have the meaninglessness of life. The Caretaker is a classical tragicomedy in 3 acts, was first presented in 1960. The play examines the underlying relationships between 3 men, an old homeless tramp, Davis, and the 2 damaged and disconnected brothers, Mick and Aston. Neurosis is one of the sort of ability to adapt to one's environment and the inability to develop a satisfying personality. Sigmund explains the situation as neurosis, which is manifested in behavior of people experiencing emotional distress and unconscious conflict. Aston is the most visible, neurotic, and pure example of a person damaged by the society. And we can take him as a person for this case. Aston, then, this is an example from the play. Then one day they took me to a hospital right outside London. They got me there. I didn't want to go. He said, we are going to do something to your brain. And finally, I knew that because he showed me her signature, I mean, his mother's signature. Alienation and lack of communication. Alienation is generally accepted as a social disorder, and that should be treated. And in the play, we have examples in the case of Essence. However, Pinter aims to present disclosure of the effect of social, political, economic conditions on the characters, it can be observed that all the characters of they are have the quest for identity in different ways, and they all cope with the neurotic disorders at some point. In a way, their personality disorders imprison them in an alienated and isolated world. In the psychoanalytical aspect, the conflict between Aston's superego and an ego leads to social anxiety, bringing along a lack of communication with which Aston's dominant superego gets himself punished to reduce anxiety. The conclusion. In the analysis of Beck's Endgame and Pinter's The Caretaker, in the light of Freudian psychoanalytic theory, the paper comes up with the conclusion that the identity of characters, their current situation, are production of psychological forces. In Freudian psychoanalysis, psychological disorders or an individual pathos and mental distress can be examined by considering social and cultural aspects. Thank you for listening. And this is the paper we were planning to, or we have, let me introduce you, presented in the conference.